Hello everyone, it's my great pleasure to chair this session today, and it's my true pleasure to introduce Dr. Winfred Xuan to you. Dr. Xuan is a lecturer in the College of Professional Continuing Education at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. He maintains many research interests, including functional linguistics, research synthesis, second language writing, English for academic purpose, and teaching Chinese as a second language. And he has published many articles in prestigious journals such as Word, Applied Linguistics Review, Functional Linguistics, and the Asia Pacific Educational Researchers. Today, Dr. Song is going to present on the topic research synthesis with examples from his review of grammatical metaphor. For me personally, I'm really interested in the topic. That's why I scheduled this session, and I'm chairing this session because I and my colleagues had just published a paper about grammatical metaphor also. So I'm really looking forward to learning more from Dr. Sung. And hope to ask you some questions to clarify some things. Thank you very much for your contribution, and now it's up to you, Winfred.
Okay, so thank you, Wayne. Thank you for your very generous and nice introduction. And I'm so grateful and honored to present my research with you guys here in the community through this platform. And so before I start my presentation, I would like to make an acknowledgement for this project. So this is a joint project by Dr. Chen and me, Ellen. I would like to thank Ellen for his great contribution, hard work, and patience in making this paper a better one. Thanks, Ellen. And I would like to also thank Professor Heidi Burns, Professor Lourdes Ortega, and Professor John Norris, who introduced me to the world of research synthesis and provides me with an unforgettable visiting experience at Georgetown University. Finally, I would like to thank Professor Christian Matheson for guiding me in the field of SFL and introducing me to those inspiring colleagues at Georgetown. Okay, so after today's presentation, I hope you guys know how to fish, but not only just get some fish from my presentation. Okay, so this is my own. And remember, I used some numbers for you to remember my presentation, which is 161. So that means one methodology I'm going to share is research synthesis. 6 steps I'm going to make explicit to you guys on how to conduct such research synthesis. And I'm going to use one example from my past papers we call GM synthesis. Okay, so here's a bit more about this a part of my research interest. And as you can see, I have published 4 papers in the past years on research synthesis and this field. And you can see from typology to GM to projection, and also there's another one coming for SFL and translation studies. So this presentation focus on the second one, which is what we call GM. Okay, so and also I have also started and continuing my interest in research synthesis. As you can see, we have just started those projects, like, for example, doctoral dissertation thesis in SFL, appraisal and academic writing, multimodalities and marketing studies, also reporting practice in academic writing. So those 4 projects are currently what we are doing with my co-author. So I would like to give a little bit, a big picture of what we have been doing with my team and partners and friends, something, okay? So continues a bit about why I'm interested in this methodology. So things go back to 2012. When I was a postgraduate student at PolyU Hong Kong, I was lucky to get this research funding from the Hong Kong government. And then I have 1 semester long attachment to Georgetown University, Department of German, where Professor Heidi Burns hosted me. From there, she introduced me to Professor John Norris and Professor Lourdes Ortega in this course. And they highly recommended me to take this course. They said this is a must-do thing in postgraduate school at Georgetown. So I took this course and I found that it was really fascinating, and I fell in love with this a systematic review. So as you can see, this is a class photo I took 8 years ago. On our left-hand side is Professor John Norris, and on the right-hand side, in the middle, is Professor Lourdes Ortega. They both co-taught this course, which introduced me to the fascinating world of synthesis. So in today's presentation, I'm going to focus on those items. First, I would like to tell you what is research synthesis, why do we need it? And then I continue to talk about the motivation of the present study, and what is GM, the goal and the research questions, the methodology of research synthesis, and the findings and implications from this project I'm going to share with you. Okay, so then comes next. So a huge amount of research is produced each year, often with conflicting findings each year, right? So like, for example, like approach, do we use this approach A or approach B in teaching languages? For example, do we use traditional grammar or SFL to teach, right? So sometimes those approaches will generate very conflicting findings in the area. So these differences may be due to study differences, flaws, or contextual differences. In such a situation, it's very important also for us to, it's not always clear what the overall picture is in a specific fields, or which results are the most reliable and should be used as the basis for practice and policy decision. So that's why we need a synthesis, a synthetic approach to view those primary studies in a specific field, because we have accumulated so many research under a specific domain. So what is synthesis? A synthesis means to combine a number of different pieces into a whole. Synthesis is about concisely summarizing and linking different sources in order to review literature on a topic, make recommendation, and connect your practice to research. It's not only just a review. And for most of the time, sometimes we make recommendation, and also we connect the practice to research. So, and also this is especially important in the field of applied linguistics. So what is systematic review? So here I would like to clarify, systematic review is equal to research synthesis here. So the definition is a review that is conducted according to clearly stated scientific research methods and is designed to minimize biases and errors inherent to traditional narrative reviews. Okay, so then I'm going to show why do we need systematic review, right? So there are bunches of reasons that I can elaborate and show, and why do we need such approach in our study. So to conduct a systematic secondary review of accumulative primary studies in a certain field, to answer specific research questions like primary research, and after so many years, maybe some theory or some approaches developed, and we would like to see that what kinds of findings have accumulated in the field, right? And also minimize the impact of bias and errors, because like some approaches, sometimes it can generate some conflicting findings in some studies, right? Because of different contexts or different like study backgrounds or something. So research synthesis can help us to end this confusion. And also, as I mentioned just now, if a field has accumulated a lot of primary studies, and then we can compare and combine those findings to make new findings, which is more important, or it's very essential for scholars in a specific field. And of course, after reviewing, we can identify knowledge gaps in a specific field as well. And the next slide is to share with you guys more reasons why do we need such approach. And also, facilitate rational decision making. So, and this is also very important. Like say, for example, take applied linguistics as a field. For example, if you are going to include one approach into your curriculum, so as a policymaker, so you have to review those studies or those research done with this approach to see whether it is worthy of doing that or not. So here, synthesis will help you to clarify this, and also enable practitioner to keep up to date with evidence accumulating in the field and to practice evidence-based teaching and learning. For example, if we want to see genre-based pedagogy, and so since this approach has been developed for a long time, so we have seen a lot of studies conducted around the world with different people, contexts, with different linguistic backgrounds, right? So there must be a lot of findings under this topic and with this framework. So then, and how can we translate those findings into a real practice for, like, say, for example, for frontline teachers to inform the teaching of like L2 writing, say, for example. So, and there were lots of reasons, or there were lots of like excuses for us to conduct such a synthesis, because we can combine and align those findings and translate them into takeaway for teachers. And of course, as academic, we all require nowadays to write big grants, right? Projects. So if you are new to your field and if you want to make like vettable proposal, and you can synthesis before you write the proposal, maybe this will add to the like, for example, the successful rates based on the vetting committee as well. So, and those are the reasons that we think it's very important for us to have this approach. So how it is different, I mean, compared with the traditional review. So this approach offers a new paradigm to researchers to think and act synthetically rather than idiosyncratically, remember? Okay, so synthetically, that means we combine all the studies in the field, and also we combine those, we calculate the evidences, okay, when reviewing and critiquing literature in a certain field. So in the next slide, I'm going to use a table to compare the differences between systematic review and traditional review. As you can see, like for systematic review, we have to develop research questions like journal research. But for literature review, there's no such requirements. For background, they are the same. For objective, so we have to develop very clear objective for systematic review. But while for literature review, there's no such requirement. For inclusion and exclusion criteria, we also have to state very clearly how are we going to include studies or exclude studies in a synthesis, but not for literature review. Or process of selecting articles, and we have to spell out those process clearly and explicitly, while there's no such requirement for literature review. And also the evaluation of the article as well. So the quality of the research we included, it's very important, it's the key of such a paper. So for research synthesis, we emphasize the quality of the paper very much because we want to answer specific question with some reliable findings or evidences. But for literature review, there may be or may not, okay? So the process of extracting relevant information must be very clear and specific for research synthesis, because we need to make our study replicable for those followers or for the people who like to adopt this approach. But for literature review, there's no such requirement. And also for finding a result, and this is also very important as well, because based on synthesis, we use evidences, we use numbers, statistics to show the argument or to show the claim we draw. But for literature review, sometimes may be biased because the reviewers' beliefs, needs, or theories. For the discussion, they are the same. So as you can see from this table of comparison, and they're quite different in terms of like objective, questions, inclusion and exclusion criteria, process of selecting articles, evaluation of articles, and also the results this part. Okay, so we know that they are different, and how are we going to do that, and what kinds of principles should we adopt? Okay, so in the coming next slides, and I'm going to share one guiding principle for such studies, which is what we have to Cybermeister 2013, he recommends adopting the mindset of a judge and jury rather than a lawyer. So what does that mean? A judge and jury skeptically evaluate the evidence in order to render the fairest judgment possible, right? But in contrast, a lawyer's approach to the evidence involved trying to make the best case for one side of the argument. So, and this is one principle that we have to bear in mind when we conduct systematic review. And also, and that's why we need we need partners, we need like team members to conduct a systematic review, because we want to adopt this, what we call judge and jury. One people sometimes can be biased. Okay, so since this approach is very and very I would say very fundamental. So, and it has like actually originated from psychology study or social science studies, because where those practitioners want to know those cumulative findings from medicine or psychology studies. So, and until 2002, John Norris and Lourdes Ortega introduced this approach to the studies of SLA, and then they published this like groundbreaking paper in applied languages to look at implicit and explicit grammatical teaching in grammar teaching in language learning in SLA context. So ever since then, we have seen a lot of studies have been published, and also this approach has transformed the field methodologically and standardized its study design, especially in North America. And if you look at AAAL, an American Association of Applied Linguistics, they have like standardized the methodology of conducting those like quantitative studies, especially they use those like statistical models if they report those data, and also report the context. They have set some rules, especially for example on how many participants should be valid, and also say for example effect size or p-value, these kind of things. They have set some rules and standard in making those study design become reliable and scientific. Okay, so in this slide, I'm going to tell you the key characteristics of research synthesis. So we have 5 characteristics. Okay, so we must have clear stated title and objective, like the primary studies. And then based on the title, we must have comprehensive strategies to search for relevant studies, both unpublished and published. And also we should develop explicit and justified criteria for inclusion and exclusion of any studies. So maybe based on the keywords you have developed, so you will not include every studies into your synthesis, because maybe some studies are not qualified based on the criteria you have set, or could not contribute to answering the research question you have set, okay? Then based on the study you have sorted out, and the 4th feature is we have to develop clear presentation of the characteristics of each study, including an analysis of methodology. And also, based on the coding, we also have developed a comprehensive list of all studies excluded and justification for inclusion. So those are some important key features before we conduct a synthesis. So here, I'm going to tell you the number 6, okay? So the 6th step to conduct a synthesis. So due to the time limit today, I could not elaborate with more detail on these 6 principles. Actually, we can conduct several workshops and to teach like beginners on how to do this step by step if we have time. But today I just like go through with you guys in a very quick mode, and I would like to show you my GM study as an example to illustrate. Okay, the first step is we have to specify a problem in the field. So as I mentioned just now, it's just like primary study design. So we always start with a research question. So based on the research question, so we develop some key terms. So then the second step is using those key terms to retrieve those published studies, what we call participant for such a synthesis. Okay, so, and after that, when we generate a body of literature, right? So then the first step is we should sort out those studies, because as I mentioned just now, not every study is eligible for answering your question you have provided. So we have to apply those what we call inclusion and exclusion criteria. So after that, and then we finalize our participant for this study. So then we have a list of participants, what we say. And the fourth step is based on the first step, the research question, we are going to develop the coding scheme, what we call coding book, because based on the coding book, and we will based on the research question and to develop different categories of coding for the sake of quantifying the findings in the fifth step. But before the fifth step, it's also very important to discuss the coding scheme, the coding book, and also to maintain and first to conduct pilot coding with your teammates, and then clear all the coding inconsistency or conflicting things from the coding. Then after that, and you maintain the coding consistency, and also you maintain what we call intercoder reliabilities and all the problem we have solved. And then we can go to the fifth step. After massive coding, we'll quantify the findings based on the coders. In the sixth step, and we generate and interpret the findings of such a synthesis. So, and this is just a very briefly and general introduction of such approach, but I hope you remember these six steps as I told you just now, right? So the problem, the literature, criteria, coding, and quantification and interpretation. So those are the six steps that, generally speaking, we will apply to conduct research synthesis. Okay, so in the next slides, I'm going to use my GM paper, my GM synthesis with Dr. Chan as an example to show you how do we generate the findings, how do we do such a project. Okay, so what is GM? So for those people who are in a field which is quite familiar to all of us, right? So to quote Halliday, 1985, an alternative lexical-grammatical realization of a semantic choice. So here choice means that we can have what we call congruent, incongruent type of realization. Say, what we say incongruency is an untypical or marked form of expression. So here, I'm going to use an example to show you what is GM. For example, I took this example from PolyU Academic Writing Center. So on your left-hand side, I have bolded those instances of GM, and it's only one clause, right? This is from academic writing textbook, and it's quite condensed, like reliance on scripted spoken text retards students' ability to interact in the unscripted worlds of conversation outside the classroom. So on the right-hand side, if unpack those what we call GM into the congruent type, I mean what we call everyday language, so we can unpack this one clause into three clauses, for example. Furthermore, as students rely on scripted spoken text, they become less able to interact outside the classroom, where people in the world converse without a script. So, this is a typical example of GM. And so GM has been classified by meta functions. So we have ideational GM, interpersonal GM, and textual GM. And also this framework have been applied to different areas of studies. So in the past, like 13 years, more than 13 years. So we can see like for L1 language development, L2 or second or fourth language classroom, or scientific discourse, translation studies, language description, it seems. So people use this framework have generated a large body of literature of findings under this framework. So today, we are so curious about this framework and what kinds of contribution this framework help us to understand the use of language in different areas of studies. So here comes the goal of these studies. So we would like to investigate the theoretical elaborations, clarifications, and refinements of GM as a concept since Halliday, 1985. And we'd like to determine the extent to which the study of GM has enrich our description and understanding of language use, especially as I mentioned just now, in different areas of like research or contexts. And also we would like to consolidate the findings of the field, like to use a metaphor here, just as a cartographer, right? We like to build a map of this area. We like to generate the patterns of findings from GM. And also, of course, and we like to suggest new directions for future studies. Okay, so because of these goals, and we like to realize those goals by developing 4 sets of research questions. For example, source questions, for example, who is doing GM, in what countries, and in what publication formats? Are there any discernible changes in answers to research question 1 over time? Number 2, substantive questions. What theoretical frameworks inform the definition of GM use in the study? How much attention has been given to researching GM in each of the 3 meta functions, ideational, interpersonal, and textual? Number 3, in terms of methodology, we're curious about what are the methodological approaches used to study GM, and what are the characteristics of the data have been used in terms of genre, text type, sample size, languages, modes, etc. If applicable, what are the characteristics of the participants in these studies, like age, language proficiency, etc.? Results question. So what research domains can we identify in GM studies, and what has been discovered in these domains of interest? The question 9, what do the study findings suggest about the scope and maturity of the domain of GM? So I know it's a long list of research questions, right? So maybe you've, oh, wow, this is a huge project. This is a long list of research questions. And it seems that we have to get a lot of evidence or data to answer those questions and the findings, something, right? So yes, it is. So then let's go. So then the next one, to answer those research questions, and I would like to do the first step, as I mentioned just now, the literature search. For example, we have done exhaustive search of key databases for articles and books published since 1985. We also have done manual search for relevant journals. And of course, we also serve those websites of major authors who are doing GM in our field. So then we developed the terms GM, SFL, SFG, those appearing in the title, abstract, and text articles and books or something. We include those studies. Oops. Okay, so for the databases we use for these studies, we adopt Eric Y. Ovid's Linguistics and Language Behavior Abstract, Pocrates Social Sciences, one search engine from Hong Kong Polytechnic University, Pocrates dissertation and thesis. So we also done some like manual search for some key journals, Functions of Language, Functional Linguistics, Prospects, Systems, and Linguistics and Human Sciences, etc. And because some papers we could not retrieve, or we don't have the right, or maybe our library did not buy those journals, so we have contacted some authors for their personal sharing. So also this is a very important aspect in getting your data. So you have to write email messages and then to talk to those professors, scholars for sharing or something. But for most of the cases, they're very happy to share their research. Okay, so then after we generate a body of literature based on the search of the data, so that means we have a potential, we have gathered those potential candidates or participants for this research synthesis. So the second step is we have to study those eligibility of those studies by applying what we call inclusion and exclusion criteria. So here, so in this slide, I'm going to talk about those inclusion criteria. So we include study published ever since 1985 by Halliday. And of course, we also included and published dissertation or thesis. And those studies must, studies in which GM is theorized in light of SFL. And also studies with the foreign focus like register variation, language education, language description, language comparison, translation, etc. Studies using any methodological approach will include like quantitative, qualitative, descriptive, etc. So then the second slide I'm going to talk about is the exclusion criteria. We exclude some studies, like for example, study published in languages other than English, because we don't read Portuguese, Spanish, and and Japanese as well. So we exclude those studies. And also studies related to metaphor and GM in a literary sense. That means non-SFL conceptualization. So we excluded those studies. And the third one is we also excluded conference papers and presentation because they are ongoing, and also for some of those paper studies are not peer reviewed. So then after applying the inclusion and exclusion criteria to those 152 studies we have retrieved and examined. So in the end, a total of 118 studies were retained for this synthesis. Okay, so, and based on this participant, what we call the studies, right? We have the participant, that means we have finished the data collection. So now the next step is we're going to analyze our data based on the research question we have set out. So we have to go back the 4 sets of research question we have laid out at the beginning, right? So by source, by substantive, by methodology, and also by results. So based on these 4 categories and also our research questions, so we have developed those codings, what we call coding book or coding scheme. So that means we have to extract those data from each of the participants, or we can say article study we have retrieved. Then, for example, those are the detailed information that we have coded for answering the research questions. And I'm now going to show you a part of the coding book. And you can see based on the first row of the Excel spreadsheet, different color. For example, this is for source question. This is for substantive question. The green one is for example, for methodology. The purple one is for findings and implications. So then you can see we have coded and all the studies with very evidence-based findings. Okay, so then after this, I'm going to show you the result of the finding of this project. Due to the time limit, I can't share everything within such a short presentation. So I only highlight some interesting points that I think I would like to share with you guys here. Say for example, based on source questions, so almost 60% of journal articles and 35% belong to book chapters, and only 8% are monograph, study on GM. And especially over the year, we can see that with the publication of this book, it contributes to the surge of the literature in early 2000s. And you can see actually GM continue moving forward because we just included study until 2018. So like 2019 and 20, I would say more studies are publishing. So this is the general trend of the field developments. And for the second research question, substantive question. So actually you can see that very interesting. Almost 80% of those studies focus on ideational grammatical metaphor. 5% focus on interpersonal, while 8% focus on ideational plus interpersonal. And for 2% focus on semiotic. So you can see there's a large proportion of scholars focused on ideational grammatical metaphor. And for most of the data, for GM study, actually almost 75% of those studies focus on written data. So only 8% focus on spoken data. Okay, so, and also in terms of text type, and very interesting, in our area, in our discipline, people do not report the text type, the text they analyze. Almost half of those studies did not report what kinds of data, what kinds of text type, and they have adopted, right? So it just show us what did they analyze and come to the findings or something. So, and 35% the text belong to expounding. So, and these findings I apply Matheson's model of what we call social semiotic process, and to categorize and calculate the findings. and units of analysis, because we are a discipline of text analysis, right? So the units of analysis is very important. However, if you look at those findings, it's very interesting. When people report the measuring unit or the unit of analysis in their findings, it's very interesting. Or in the methodology, it's very interesting. We have different types, right? Excerpt, text, article, book, clause, words, expression, time, meeting and presentation, writing text, etc., etc. So I just illustrate some of those findings from our research. Okay, so, and here are the list of those, the most prolific writers. If you want to, as a new scholar in the field, and if you want to know who has like made the most contribution so far, and you can see those as a map for you to start with GM studies. And I think that's also quite nice to have this list as well. Okay, so the results, content analysis. So based on those 118 studies we have generated, so we just categorize, and also we summarize 6 major themes under GM study. For example, language comparison, language education, language description, multimodality, register variation, and translation studies. So here, I will only focus on language education. I just share the findings from the biggest sector in this pie because time limits. And also, in this slide, it's about how do we code, for content analysis, except just extract the findings, we also do this kind of like tech with different studies to see by different domains or theme in our coding. Okay, so under the domain of language education, we have categorized those findings based on 4 streams. For example, GM and L1 development, L2 pedagogy, academic literacy, academic writing assessments. So let me share with you guys one by one. So GM is a powerful mode of meaning for the child in L1 developments, and preschool children's linguistic development is related to their literacy development later in the school life. And also, this study conclude that it links to the literacy development per se, especially when children are exposed to disciplinary knowledge learning and demand to manage abstract phonologic written text. And also, Tor finds that interesting interpersonal GM, together with other model resources, provides a vehicle for children's learning. And in these studies, they show that GM will not emerge in children's writing until 9 to 10 years old. The study confirms what Halliday summarized as the 3 stages of language development, like generalization, abstraction, and metaphor. And by Christian and Deranka, they describe GM use from the beginning of primary to the end of secondary in Australian contexts. Okay, so, and this is some highlight from L1 development. In terms of L2, and most are focused on pedagogy. So they find GM is knowledge construction. And for Killips suggests that the model of GM could facilitate language teachers to enhance language teaching. It's a power tool. And by Moham and Beckett, they found that scaffolding can help students to improve their L2 writing scaffold and how to use GM. And Columbia also suggested by comparing the Spanish L2 and English L1, the students can transfer those features from the L1 to the L2 academic writing in terms of GM usage. Okay, the third line of research is GM and academic literacy. Love suggests that teachers could pay more attention to GM. The student could learn scientific language better if teacher have this awareness. And also subsequent study also confirm those findings, like from medicine, from chemistry studies. So in EAP context, studies found that GM could be used to evaluate proficiency in writing abstracts. However, that doesn't mean that if you use more GM, and that means your language proficiency, language level is better. So from the other this study, it's quite a new finding to our field, right? So, and also GM not only help build up condensed and abstract academic text, but also contribute to the cohesion of academic texts. So from the other studies. So therefore, and I mean, all those researchers agree that explicit instruction for various types of GM in EAP program is essential to success. So we have to make it explicit, but actually we don't know how to make it at this stage, only just by those studies shown that, right? So, and the last line is GM and academic writing assessment. How are we going to use GM to assess students' academic writing, right? So goading student L2 academic writing, like for example, successful L2 Spanish learner will use GM appropriately in their L2 academic writing. So, and Chiga and Columbia even conclude that GM could be seen as an indicator of advanced list, but this finding is kind of contradictory based on what I share with you, like the previous PowerPoint slide. That doesn't mean like advanced list if they don't know how to use GM cohesively in the writing. So, but also they say that GM could go students' academic or professional identities. From the study by Rashina, they find that successful usage of GM in the students' book reviews will directly contribute to the rhetorical successful text. Here in terms, rhetorical means thematic progression patterns. Okay, so yeah, that finds that GM utilization does not necessarily lead to colloquiality, lexical density, and cohesive organization. So then, McKay in her study suggests that we need to unpack those GM into L2 English reading class and actually help students. And of course, and Rashina, so all studies shown that equipping those graduate student teacher in graduate school with knowledge of GM will help in the teacher training. It will be a plus for their career developments, especially for those advanced level of language teaching, where students learn the language through exploring content. Okay, so those are the findings, or some highlights I have summarized from the findings. Okay, let's go to the discussion. So based on the source and the substantive question, you can see as most of the study focus on ideation of GM, which occupies almost here, this is a mistake, sorry, 80% of the study we have synthesized. And for operationalization of GM, and most of the study, they didn't spell out the differences between normalization as transcategorization or normalization as GM. So also this should be a notice or reminder to those researchers who is going to do GM analysis, please distinguish the two. And for methodology, so as I mentioned just now, the unit of analysis reporting into studies are not clearly reported. Quite a number of studies did not report the size of the data they employ, and most of the data are written, and most of the study are qualitative. But how about quantitative? Maybe you can engage with like corpus studies, right? Corpus-based studies, and also others, mixed methods. And most of the study on about cross-sectional studies. So if like under language education, maybe more longitudinal studies will be interesting, especially in like foreign language learning, these contexts. And more source languages and text types should be explored in further studies to complete the landscape in the study of grammatic metaphor. And also, should we have a standard? I think that's very important. So how to standardize studies adopt text or discourse analysis approach? It seems that we don't have such a standard in our discipline. And on how to choose like text, sample text, typical texts, or how to describe or justify your data in your methodology, because that's very important for people to interpret, to understand your findings, and also how much data should be enough. And the next step, and how to conduct text analysis. Should we develop some guiding principles? Should we, like, for example, like give some like guidelines for young scholars or for people who are interested in this approach? And this is also very important to standardize the methodology. And at the same time, I would like to say that to make your content transparent, to let the others to replicate your studies by the followers. Yeah, okay. For content analysis, so it is obvious that most of the GM researchers are from the field of language education. However, as we can see from the statistics, It is recommended that future researchers should divert researchers' attention to the field of professional communication. More attention needed to be given to the teaching of languages other than English, enlarging the application of GM in different settings with different target languages. And as a pedagogical framework, as I mentioned just now, there were so many findings, even contradictory findings. So how can we transform this framework into like down to a framework that frontline language teachers and educators can use, but not only just stop there. Oh, my findings show that this is useful, or this is very important for students to understand, but what is the next step? So this is the research gap that we need to do as like language educators or practitioners, and inform those frontline teachers how to use the framework easily, or how can we translate those findings into some guiding principles that can help or can advance the teaching of academic English or other languages and language education. So, and also it is recommended that future researchers should pay more attention to the description of languages other than English, Chinese, and German. If you look at those languages they do with, right? Okay, conclusion. So this synthesis has uncovered patterns in the studies of GM in terms of source, substantive, and methodological features. It also makes a major contribution to the field by providing an overview of the focus areas of research and the findings within those areas. So this synthesis demonstrates the breadth and depth of information that can be yielded from a research synthesis. Content analysis proves to be a useful tool in identifying and presenting common themes addressed in qualitative studies. So this is the end of my presentation. So I would like to ask you a question. So do you know how to fish now? And to end my presentation, I use a quote from the Hong Kong government. We collectively, we try our very best to, together we fight the virus. And then here, to end my presentation, together we synthesize our research. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the fascinating presentation, Winfred.
Thank you, Win. Thank you, the audiences. Thank you so much for your attention and patience.
Your presentation has clarified some questions from me already. Yes,
wow.
I had learned from research synthesis. Actually, I haven't used it in my PhD. I only use a narrative. Yeah, the traditional one. So it is great to learn. And as far as I know, this approach has been used a lot in the field of health and medicine.
Medicine and social sciences, yes.
Yeah, excellent. So question time, everyone. Please feel free.
Jim has a question, right? Jim has a question?
Yeah.
Hi, Jim.
Hi.
Hi, thank you.
You can hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Nice to see you. Very nice presentation.
Nice to see you, Jim. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, so the question is, using this framework, I mean, one thing you would hope to happen would be that issues and debates in the field would come up. And towards the end, you mentioned one of these, the confusion of nominalization with grammatical metaphor, but other ones you didn't mention might be, is there such a thing as textual metaphor, or do we model grammatical metaphor as semantic junction or stratal tension, or how do we distinguish logical from experiential metaphor, and so on and so on. So I'm wondering, using this methodology, is there a way in which debates and issues can be brought forward, or is that something that needs to be added or developed, or what's your position on that?
I think to me, both are quite possible, right? So we can add on some new theoretical framework based on the previous discussion, and also maybe different perception to what we mentioned, textual metaphor and logical metaphor. And so people can, as I mentioned, just like it's a refinement or clarifications. And also the other way, I would like to say it's also possible because maybe people will have to like clarify, like as I mentioned in my PowerPoint slide. So like chance categorization is not is not like GM or something. So I don't know whether I answer questions, but yeah. either way is possible, I think.
It's just really crucial in evaluating the studies if people don't clearly distinguish nominalization from grammatical metaphor, transcategorization from grammatical metaphor.
This is quite common.
Make the results because you don't know what the analysis is actually based on. And so it seems to me a framework like the one you're proposing has to be able to dig into that kind of issue and bring it up, because when you're doing a literature review, like finding out what the issues are really fundamental for moving forward.
Absolutely, anyway. I agree. I can't agree more with you. So that's why we need to, maybe we need more discussion on how to standardize this, and also how to make those frameworks become easier for those outsiders or for those newcomers to digest and to use or to apply, because we are a school of applicable linguistics, right? Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you for your questions. Very nice to see you.
Yeah, thank you very much, James. In my recent publication about grammatical metaphor, I explained those three terms briefly. So the difference between, no, not this year, because so that's why it was not included in your review, because it was just published in April this year, and I explained a bit the difference between nominalization, grammatical metaphor, and transcategorization. Yeah, but so I just mentioned my paper published in April this year, and I explained those concepts a bit in the theoretical background session.
Yeah, you did. I remember your paper. You made a very good distinction there, but unfortunately, our paper conducted like before 2018, so we didn't include your study. It's a pity. Yeah, especially I remember you used a sample of possession to distinguish process, and yeah, I know your paper, and I know you have mentioned that. Very good.
Okay, so hopefully in the future we will include it.
Yes, yeah, that's very important, because if your framework is like it's not clear, so how can you say that your finding is justified and persuasive, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any more questions, everyone?
Can I ask a question?
Oh, sure, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Xuan. It's a very it's a very enlightening presentation. So your survey focuses largely on research dealing with ideational metaphor in the field of education. So I'm wondering if you have any, if you have collect data concerned with the use of interpersonal metaphor in educational settings. If you have, can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Not many. I remember there's only one study by Cassie Liada's study. She looked at the interpersonal metaphor in academic writing. So she used like those microsets, like those modalities and model resources, metaphorical way to express, like, for example, I think on these things to check students' interpersonal meaning making in their academic writing for from Chinese students, I think. Yeah, not many studies using this approach, and I think if you want to know more about this area, so Cassie Liada's studies is, I think, it's quite groundbreaking in terms of this. Yeah. And also, I think she must be also very informative in terms, as I mentioned just now, her findings have some like inconsistent with what people found before. Like the more GM doesn't mean that your language proficiency is higher. And I think she's quite justified from her studies. So, and she has published a series of studies ever since 2016. We have discussed this like before through email communication, and she at least 5 papers in terms of this, and she has published, yeah, and her PhD is on GM and academic writing. So you can, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Liu.
There are two questions in the chat box, Winfred.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. I think my question is similar to the one raised by She. May I check if your research project team has designed or adopted any digital device to facilitate the coding process? So far, we didn't adopt any digital devices to do that. Like it's very popular nowadays. I forgot the one to do with size space or something, right? So we don't do that because if you want to know detailed analysis, so far, according to my understanding, no digital technologies or software can help us to realize this, because you really need to read each paper and extract those relevant information, not only the finding, because you have to go back to the context and to the design, to link back to the design to interpret the findings. So how would doctoral students or teacher researchers benefit further from synthesis research across disciplines through taking the SFL theoretical framework if they are newcomer to SFL communities? So for new PhD students, I think it's very important for students to understand, why do you use SFL in your PhD study, and how text analysis contribute to the answer of your research question. So this is the first step. Thank you, Phoebe. And the second thing is, since you know how and what will help your research, then of course, then you have those keywords in your mind, as I mentioned just now, right? So by retrieving those data by using these keywords and with good databases, and I'm sure you can generate the relevant body of literature for your studies. Okay, so for Xu Qingxin, how do you see the contribution of this literature synthesis approach to semiotic web or knowledge graph in natural language processing, which develop algorithms to grab information from large data and automatically generate a network demonstrating that information? Yeah, Beth, thank you for your question. As I mentioned just now, up to now, I think if you really want to know the complexity or the differences among those groups of findings under a research domain, I don't think those software can help us to extract those data so far. I think we still need to read the literature and the papers one by one, and then to find out those information that really can help you answer your research question. Yeah, thank you.
2% about semiotic metaphor.
Yeah, Zhigang, it's I noticed the data analysis of just 2%. It's about semiotic metaphor. I'm interested in that topic. Could you please share? Of course, I will share that with you. It's also, and those words have been done by Kay, her team. She introduced what we call semiotic metaphor in her studies. And if you're interested, you can email me and I can share the paper with you. Thank you. Despite the colossal data considered, you have done well. Thank you. About
how do you identify the problem of a certain field and decide the restrictions accordingly before conducting systematic analysis?
Oh, yes. And this is a very good question. I would say TP Link, who's PP Link? I'm sorry. Yes, it's not just I haven't had enough time to elaborate how are we going to conduct such a study and which field is doable or something, because not every field is mature enough for such a synthesis. So you have to have a brief understanding of the field first. And the second is you have, for example, as I mentioned just now, genre-based pedagogy. We want to know, okay, what kinds of findings from which context we have generated from the past research. We want to clarify. We want to know that whether we can use, say, for example, in Hong Kong. But maybe those from Australia, those from the US might not be applicable to Hong Kong context. We have some field studies in Hong Kong conducted by our team. So then we have to, we have to have question based on our practice or based on our, for example, your research something. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Any more questions, everyone?
Do you have any position on why several scholars seem to focus more on the ideational over the others according to your work? Kingsley, thank you for your question, but unfortunately, I can't tell you why, but maybe because of, like, for example, nominalization or ideational GM is the most dominant one, and it's also easy to describe and apply. If you apply the whole framework, but sometimes you're not focused on that. I mean, depends on what kinds of research question you are going to ask, right? It's always based on the question before you go to find your framework and then to directly find the data to answer your question. So I don't think I have any observation or any findings from this project. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe one small question from me.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it is obvious that there are many benefits using this approach, but I wonder if there are any limitations. Can we use it in any field with any topic?
Yes, I would say it's very beneficial for like PhD students, and especially I think like a new PhD student, and he or she needs to do a lot of those literature search, right? So then this approach is quite important, quite handy and convenient, because you can kill two birds by one stone. When you do this literature review in your dissertation, and also you can publish some synthesis paper, and also in a short time you can become a real scholar in your field or something. But yeah, as I mentioned, it also has drawbacks. Like, for example, not every field can be like synthesized because of the degree of maturity. Sometimes you have to be like, for example, only just like 4 studies. So that must be not that persuasive, the findings.
But you mentioned earlier that for this approach, we need at least 2 members to do the literature.
Yes, yes.
So how about that?
As I said just now, we need judge and jury, right? Because like when you evaluate those studies, one people's like effort always cannot like work better than two minds. So at least you have 2 people, like 2 team members or 3, and then that could be a good team, and you guys can do a lot of work together, and also especially in your collaboration process, like the coding book, you have to code like 10 studies together. Then you have to come to meetings to reach this what we call inter-rater coder reliability or something.
Inter-rater reliability. Yeah. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Win. Thank you, everybody.
Questions?
Yeah.
So if people join us, any more questions, everyone? No. If not, we can stop now. Thank you so much again, Winfred, for your contribution and for the fascinating presentation, and everybody for joining us today.
Thank you. Yeah, it's my great honor to share my research.
One more talk by the end on the 30th of July by Mus, Dongwing Jen, and I will send out further information. So thank you very much again, everyone, and I hope you have a lovely evening.
Yeah, thank you. Good day, everybody. So yeah.
Thank you, Winfred.
Bye.
Enjoy.
Yeah, bye. See you next time. Bye.
See you.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye from Ghana.
Bye.
Oh, hi, Wing. Can I ask, it's not related to the presentation anyway. Yeah, it's just a personal question. Yeah, I was just wondering, because, sorry?
I will stop it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, I'm just talking to you, so it's just fine. Yeah. Yeah, I know this session is recorded, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I was just wondering, where can we check out the